April 24th, Town Council meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge. Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you. I'm going to start off by just saying a few words about, on Saturday, Barbara Bush passed away at 92 years old. And actually, I heard on the way here that former President H.W. Bush was lying in a hospital bed in Houston. And they were a historic couple and were married the longest of any couple ever to hold office in the United States. And President H.W. Bush was the longest, has survived the longest of any president that lived the longest. And they actually have a number of West Hartford roots that I thought you might find interesting. William Bucky Bush, George H.W. Bush's brother, lived actually at the house next door to my house on Colony Road. And Barbara Bush's sister, Martha Pierce Rafferty, lived with her husband, Walter G. Rafferty, for many years at 20 Northmore Road, and she was a trustee at Renbrook from 1967 to 1971. And in her obituary in the paper, she was asked for donations to Renbrook School, so it was a very dear place to her. The Bush family, also Jenna Bush Hager, is returning for the second time a program hosted by Jewish Family Services at KO on May 17th to talk about mental health awareness with Patrick J. Kennedy. So, and I just wanted to say a few things that really I remember very much about Barbara Bush. She was so witty and wise and sharp and warm, and she was authentic, which I think is something that you don't see often in the political world. She, being the matriarch of her family, she actually turned gray, and I remember this when my son was very sick, turned gray after the death of her oldest child in 1945, and remained gray intentionally. Jenna was describing her and said there were 3 L words: levity, love, and literacy. She had humility and decency and was truly a woman of honor and character, and President Obama said she was the best of the American spirit. And I particularly remember her holding a baby with AIDS and visiting AIDS patients in hospice when there was much fear about how people spread AIDS. She was a deep conscience and was said to bridge the divide between political parties, which we could all use now on the federal level. I don't think here, but and in a recent interview with an author, I think it was Robert Meacham, she had told his kids that she said, my biggest moment she said, my key advice is be kind. My biggest moments of regret were the times I could have been kinder. So we're thinking our gratitude for their service and our condolences to their family. So number 4, Ms. Kerrigan.
'19 fiscal year budget, April 4th, 2018, and April 11th, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any public forum tonight. Number 5, Mrs. Kerrigan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we place items 18 through 26 on the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We will go on to number 8.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we set for public hearing on June 12, 2018 at 6:30 in the Legislative Chamber and refer to TP&Z and DRAC, an application by 47 Pratt Street, LLC, owner 1340 and 1344 New Britain Ave, and 8 to 16 Berkshire Road, requesting a change of the underlying zone for 1.7 acres of the northeast corner of the intersection of New Britain Ave and Berkshire Road from R6 One-Family Resident District to RM2 Multifamily Resident District, and Special Development District designation for proposed 26-unit multifamily development in 3 buildings to be known as Berkshire West.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in, and refer to TP&Z track, did you say that? Yes,
Yes.
okay, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. The next items we will be discussing together. So Ms. Kerrigan is going to make a motion to do that. We've historically done all the budget items together in discussion and then vote on them separately, so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we make a motion to discuss items 9 through 13. Item number 9, an ordinance concerning appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018. Item 10, an ordinance deauthorizing $5,552,000 for projects authorized in the capital improvement budget for the fiscal year 2018-2019, appropriating $15,063,000 for the projects in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2019-2020, and authorizing the issuance of bonds of the town in the amount not to exceed $9,511,000 to finance the appropriations, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. I knew I should have gotten some order. Item 11, an ordinance concerning appropriations to and in the capital improvement fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018. Item 12, substitute resolution concerning a tax levy on the list of October 1st, 2017. And item 13, resolution authorizing year-end budgetary transfers.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. So this is the discussion of a lot of work, not only from our town staff, but of the counselors too, and especially in the past, since the town manager's presentation. So is there anyone that would like to start discussion?
Do we start with comments from the town manager?
Oh, let's do that first. Yeah, we should go through the adjustments and where we stand now. Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Call me Mr. Hart.
No, I said thank you, Mr. Hart. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So the budget documents that are before you include the adjustments that we've discussed at the Finance and Budget Committee level, as well as an adjustment to the education cost-sharing grant for next year. And in total, both in terms of revenue adjustments and expenditure adjustments, and I have the detail here if needed, those adjustments total $3,365,442. And that would include the $1.6 million discussed at the Finance and Budget Committee level, as well as an additional $1,779,091 in education cost-sharing funds for next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart. Is there any questions? Okay, with that, anybody? Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am lucky to have the honor of kicking off this budget discussion. This is my third budget, and I've never been more excited, particularly in light of the state of our state, though today I heard we have increased revenues. No doubt, of all the decisions this council makes, this decision, this vote, is the most important. And why? Because it's about money, your money. Identified as the top stressors in loving relationship, money has destroyed many a marriage. And where money comes from and where to put your money are tough conversations and not for the timid. I will be wholeheartedly, enthusiastically supporting this budget. I support this budget because it is a smart, prudent budget. I support this budget despite the fact that just last year I purchased my dream convertible, knowing now I will be paying more to own each of our 3 cars. Because make no mistake about it, life is not just about money, it's about value. Because if it were just about money, when I need a root canal, I would shop around for the least expensive dentist, but I don't. Because sometimes you do get what you pay for. So the question before us is what are we getting for our money? Are we getting our money's worth? Well, for starters, West Hartford is the #1 best place to live in Connecticut. It was voted the best place for millennials in Connecticut. We receive an A+ grade for quality of schools, crime, housing trends, and access to amenities. Our town is nationally recognized. We travel anywhere, and you say West Hartford, and people know what town you're talking about. They admire our town, and we're the envy of other towns. Our single biggest investment is in education, and Tom Moore continues his commitment to work efficiently, driving down the per pupil cost to 117th of the 169 towns while maintaining national recognition. Listen to Tom Moore speak, and you will hear why West Hartford is a destination town for quality public education. He truly believes in education for all. But pride doesn't pay the bills, money does. And no one here feels good when a neighbor or friend stops you to complain about spending more and getting less. I don't like spending more and getting less. But the unfortunate reality is our costs are going up. Just look at the MDC that increased our bill this year for sewage by 10% to over $10 million. And while it's easy to say no to a budget without offering any solutions, it's just like me telling my kids, no, you don't have to do your homework. Ultimately, they will pay the price. We must keep our eyes both on value and money. We can't say no to the detriment of the core services our town delivers and the people rely on. Trust that each of us on the council, like yourself, is concerned about our financial obligations and familiar with the significant cost drivers. We are committed to engaging in a robust conversation with everything on the table so that West Hartford can have a sustainable budget for all residents. Our staff, led by Matt Hart, who asked every department for a 10% reduction, along with Peter Privatera and Liz Hewitt and Barbara Rua, are knowledgeable and transparent with the numbers. A special shout out to John Phillips, who saved us over $1 million in waste removal. We are all committed to the challenge of an affordable West Hartford, attracting millennials, as well as allowing seniors the option to live out their life here. At my age of 63, I am closer to retirement than my working years. And with 2 sophomores facing college, I am hypersensitive to money. And as I look at the illustration that Pete Privatera provided for us of the average homeowner with 2 vehicles paying about $10,000 a year, that came to about $833 a month. And I look at my bills, I look at my family's cell bill, our internet, and our cable TV, and that's about half that monthly bill. So for my family to be connected and entertained, we pay about half of what we pay for our garbage to be picked up, our recycling to be picked up, our police on notice 24/7, firemen, emergency vehicles at the touch of a button, safe sidewalks, plowed streets, nationally recognized quality public education, leisure services, including 6 public pools, 2 golf courses, 42 tennis courts, an indoor skating ring, as well as beautiful parks. We are rich in culture and diversity, a plethora of restaurants. We get a good bang for our buck, and we're soon to have a Shake Shack. In a time when our state is scrambling for money, we are fortunate to have Senator Bai, Representative Slapp, Ferengia, and Fleischman successfully fighting to be sure we get every penny we deserve. Huge kudos to Mayor Sherry Cantor, who I don't think has gotten a good night's sleep since budget, well, probably since before the budget. A mayor who cares deeply about our residents, who works relentlessly for us all, for no other reason that she loves this town, West Hartford, and the people in it. So it is with unwavering pride that I vote yes on this budget, a reduction in a mill rate, with an eye towards talking about our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kerrigan. Mr. Burns.
Thank you. And thank you to the town manager and to our finance director and to Liz for all of your work on the budget. Also, thank you to my colleagues for all of the time that we've all spent in committee meetings going over these numbers. While I expect, at least for my part, we'll disagree on the budget, I certainly respect the effort and time that has gone into the process. And so it seems like we've been talking about budget issues for about a year and a half. When we first heard last January that, I guess the beginning of February, that the governor was going to be cutting state aid, we started talking about last year's budget that continued through when the state passed their budget in late 2017, and we were already in the process of working on a budget for this year. As many of you will recall, last year we were facing a $25+ million budget cut at the hands of the governor and the legislature. During that process, Moody's put us on negative outlook for our credit rating because of the town's spending and budget, but also the issues related to the state. And while we ultimately ended up being about $7 to $8 million short on state aid, it was a very difficult year, and a warning really to people in and around the state about the issues that we confront at the town level, certainly being tied to the state for aid. And so this year in March, we received our preliminary budget, and I was disappointed to realize or to learn that we didn't take into consideration the lessons that we had been through just a number of months before that. We started with a budget that proposed a budget increase of about $9.7 million. It was recently adjusted downward through revenue and expenditure adjustments to about 9.1, and then within the last 24 hours, an adjustment to ECS money, assuming that the state will be sending us additional revenue to the tune of about $2.4 million. And just before this meeting, we had a special district meeting, and we learned that our parking fund revenue is off about $650,000 for the upcoming year, and we're looking at a deficit of about $250 million for the current year, for a total net deficit approaching $900,000 just for the parking lots. And so when we look at the proposed budget, the first thing that struck me was that it didn't take into consideration the state budget issues. So in the last number of years, we've received $20+ million from the state, decreasing pretty steadily over the last couple years. And we know going forward, based upon the out years in the state budget through next year and through at least the next two bienniums, we're going to be facing about somewhere near $5 billion state deficit in both bienniums. And that inevitably is going to have a consequence here in West Hartford and other towns when state aid is reduced. And so I was hoping that we would be in a position to prepare for that in advance of it happening, and was disappointed when the budget was released and we did not take that into consideration. Also, as I mentioned, we had Moody's put us on a negative outlook, and a town's credit rating, as we've talked about here in the council and in committee meetings, is important because it makes it cheaper. A better credit rating makes it cheaper to borrow money, but it also is a signal to your residents and your businesses and to people that want to invest in your community that you are financially stable. And so what Moody's told us back in October of 2017 was that in order to protect our AAA credit rating, the way that we would put it at risk was if we failed to plan for lower state revenue, for a decline in financial reserves, tax-based contraction, and material growth of pension liabilities or annual pension contributions. And I think those issues are either, possibilities or issues that put us at risk that we haven't addressed in this budget. And while we have taken some action, we've moved some of our surplus money into the reserve fund, we've reduced our discount rate by a 0.25%, the issues that still drive our budget, employee costs, unfunded liabilities, and the risks presented by the state's fiscal crisis, continue to put us at risk in that respect. What has been interesting this year, notwithstanding last year's big proposed budget deficit, where we didn't have a lot of the community come out and speak about the budget, this year has been different. So even in the face of a $9.7 million increase during our 2 p.m. public forum. We had approximately 30 people in the room, had about 16 to 18 people speak, all against the budget. We've received numerous emails from people in the community telling us to hold the line on taxes, and have received a number of calls and spoken to a lot of people that are very concerned. And so the folks that came in particular to our budget forum raised a number of issues. Essentially, it was no new taxes. That was for starters. But then there were a number of people that shared their own personal experience living here in town and owning property. And one gentleman spoke about moving into his mother's house when he moved to town to care for her, and he did an analysis of his taxes, and he was able to show that his property taxes have increased 6.5% year over year for the last 13 years. Some people spoke about their property taxes going up, and at the same time their property values going down. And another gentleman who owned a number of rental properties spoke about the impact of the tax increases on his rental properties and how that's hit the poor, the working poor, and particularly the seniors that live in these units, and the impact that it's had on those folks as he raises rent, and some of them have to move out of town because they no longer can afford to live here in West Hartford. Now, last week, the town staff had prepared and presented a peer review of communities, and essentially it compared West Hartford to its peer communities and to some neighboring towns. And while the data, purported to show that compared to those other towns, that West Hartford was a bargain, I think the reality is from people in our community that have to pay for the taxes, the fees, and the service, that we know that it is expensive and for many unaffordable to live in our community. And one word we heard over and over again during the public presentation is that our budget and living in town has really become unsustainable, that we need to make changes to the way we do business here in West Hartford and at the town government level to be able to create a sustainable place for our residents to live going forward. And one of the things that I asked while we were going through this budget process, Ms. Kerrigan mentioned that, if you're not going to propose cuts, it's hard to complain about the budget. But in this budget cycle, as my colleagues know, I'd asked the town manager for what a zero budget would look like. So what would a budget look like if we had no new tax increases? So we could compare what those cuts would look like and be able to make an informed decision about, how we could manage a budget to pass through the lowest possible tax increase. And the response that I received was that it was that to be able to do that, it would create significant alterations to services and programs in town, and that information was information that I didn't receive. And so that's really where we need to look at what the difference is between holding the line on a budget and what our budget increases are. And so with what are we left with? So we have another budget increase, we have higher taxes, we have no protection against inevitable state budget cuts, we continue to place the town's AAA credit rating at risk, and we're failing to address the biggest drivers of our budget, our employee costs, our wages, pension, healthcare, and retiree benefits. And so for all of those reasons, I'm unable to support the budget tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anybody else? You want to go? Okay. Elaine, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. And before I get started, I really wanted to tip my hat. This is my first year on the council, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on this. Your knowledge of the budget is substantial, and your dedication to the town. I think people understand how much time our mayor puts in just particularly to the budget, but she is an expert here, and it was a fantastic experience for me to learn all the stuff that you put in and all the time you put into this. So I also wanted to give a shout out to the staff that were on this topic on the day-to-day basis. Our town manager, Matt and Peter, really appreciate your guidance through this, as well as Pat. And I also don't want to forget the most important person for all of us, who is Brittany, who ensured that all of our calendars were synced and made sure that we all showed up to the appropriate meetings when they were. But so last summer when I campaigned, there were three things that I think most of us all heard when we went door to door. For me, the three were taxes, schools, and public safety. And I came into this having those three issues as a top priority for me. And while, I've heard some interesting things about how this budget is being perceived, this budget reflects the priorities of this community and focuses on those three. I think the first is with regards to taxes. I just want to be very clear. This budget lowers the mill rate on real and personal property. I repeat, it lowers the mill rate on personal property. That is something that most communities would like, and it's something that we are listening to our constituents about. We saw all those emails as well. I appreciate what Councilor Bartons was saying, and every one of us, when we went into this budget process, had that in mind. And that's why we are where we are today. I think this, again, goes to the credit of the staff, particularly Mr. Hart, who worked directly with all of the managers to help reduce spending, and to Mayor Cantor for focusing in on them. And I appreciate it was an honor to work with Councilor Williams in both the public safety and admin and technology. And I think we came up with a lot of good ideas, and some of those are reflected in this budget. So the idea that we're not moving forward in this budget that with real significant cuts, I would beg to differ on that. I think there are a lot of people in here that offer those up, and they are reflected in this budget. But while I'm also here, I also want to say thank you to a few other folks, to Jared Marin, Essie, who's here as well, and Robert Palmer and Catherine Divany from the Plant Services, who also, on a day-to-day basis, I think particularly those two, work really hard to ensure that the town is modernizing and making sure it runs more efficiently. So I think, again, there are things that this budget reflects, that they're on a day-to-day basis, the staff is working to ensure that we are a modern community. We are doing everything we can to tighten our belt, particularly as Councilor Barnes noted with what's going on at the state level. Secondly, I think with regards to education, that is that's a huge priority for folks in town, is a huge priority for folks like myself, Councilor Dodge and Councilor Williams, who are of the millennial age, who are folks that are coming into town looking to raise their family here. This budget reflects a prioritization of education. We fund it. We are continuing to look to them. We have worked with the Board of Ed to find ways that we can reduce spending, but at the same time, we also prioritize programs that attract people to come to this town over surrounding communities. Because whether or not people like it or not, we're competing with other communities. And I think, again, this budget reflects that. And then finally, being so lucky to serve with Councilor Davidoff on public safety, as well as Councilor Williams, I'd like to thank both Chief Coppinger and Chief Allen. Every time we ask them to step up to the plate, they do. And I think in this budget, that reflects it again. They both stepped up and made significant savings within their departments. We had a lot of tough conversations about that with the chiefs, about what they could do and how what we need from them, and what the people of West Hartford are asking for is, we need to lower our spending. We need to figure out how to make this more manageable, and they did that, as did every other department in the town. And I think today, what we're going to vote on today is a reflection of all of those things that we heard in the campaign. Focus on public safety, education, and tightening it up. And right now, we have a lower mill rate by this budget than we did last year. And with that, I really would hope for my colleagues to support this. And again, kudos to Mary Cantor for putting this together.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Fay.
Thank you very much. I think it's very clear and evidence that we've all rolled up our sleeves and tried to dig in as best as possible, the staff, Mr. Hart, and everybody around this table, to really understand the numbers and see where opportunities exist. Now, when I pull back and look at this budget, a couple words come to mind. The first one being missed opportunity. I think we really missed an opportunity with this budget. This word is really beaten to death, but unsustainable. You know, those long-term liabilities are going to come home to roost. We've got to start addressing them. And I would say, as a new council person as well, and based on my experience in business with strategic plans and budgets and all financial things, it was a very unusual process, and I'm going to talk about each one of these. Now, when I say missed opportunity, the reason I'm saying that is because you guys might not realize, but we actually had grand list growth. So revenue actually started off higher this year, or projected to be higher than it was last year, to the tune of about $9 million. So pretty significant. And I think that just got masked with the budget because we're right where we were to start with, and we didn't get any credit really for that growth. I'd like to kind of address a couple of the comments about expense reduction or tightening. There may be pockets that exist where that happened. But overall, the budget is up. So I'm having a disconnect with how we're saying that we saved money when the overall budget that we're proposing for the coming fiscal year is higher than the one that we had and what the actual run rate is. So that doesn't really add up for me, so maybe somebody can explain that to me. It's very, very clear with 444 FTEs that the majority of the expenses are in salaries and fringe benefits. We've got to make some tough decisions. We've got to really take a step back and look at things and make this government as efficient as we can, right-size it, and do the things that we need to do to make it more efficient. You know, we can't keep going on this path, even though we got a couple of lucky breaks near the end in the last 24 hours, which allowed us to reduce our mill rate ever so modestly, 0.04. I don't know that I'd be beating the drum to take a whole lot of credit for a reduced mill rate when it really is, 4 basis points. It's not very much. And that was luck, because the original budget that was presented back in March actually had an increased mill rate. So, you can interpret it as you'd like, but there's some revenue that we're accounting from the state, which may or may not become true, and a couple of other things that may or may not come true. So I'm not so sure that this is going to come to fruition. So, when I say missed opportunity, if we had kept the budget flat, so the expenses flat based on what our projections were for last year, we would have a surplus of that grand list growth and property tax growth that I just spoke of. So we could have taken that $9 million and done something else with it. We could have put it towards our pension liabilities or medical liabilities. We could have done things to shore up the Moody's outlook, perhaps, or we could have kept it in a rainy day fund. So, I am concerned about the current budget. Now, from a process standpoint, it was very eye-opening to me, and I've got a lot to learn, and I recognize that. So I'd like to at least acknowledge that I have a lot of questions still about how the process works. But you guys are going to probably roll my eyes when I compare this to business, but you could compare it to your household too. Normally what you do is you figure out what your revenue is, right? And then you set a target of what you either want to save in a household basis or in a business, what you want your net profit to be. And your difference is what you can actually allocate to expenses or what have you, charity, whatever you want to spend it on. What we do, or what my observation is we roll forward last year's budgets. We adjust it for whatever we need to do, cost of livings, et cetera. And then we project our property tax and other revenues. And if there's a gap, we fill it, and that comes with changing our mill rate. So it's very different from what I'm used to, where you establish what your target's going to be and then you back into your expenses. We do it almost the other way around. So that was why the mill rate is mostly increased, because we don't have enough revenue to cover our expenses. So that's something I think we really need to work on. I just get concerned about our long-term obligations, and I think they're going to continue to grow. I think, credit deserves credit where credit should be, and the fact that some of these plans have been changed going forward prospectively is terrific. But when you've got the majority of people, on board who are getting the richer benefits, it's going to take a long time to roll this and to smooth it out. And I think that we're going to have to consider some very strong things, whether it's pension freezing or different payments and structures on the healthcare side. And I know there's contractuals and labor things that we have to work out, but I think we need to take some bold action. This property tax example is very, very interesting because I did a webcast when I was running for office, and I used my own home as a reference point. And from 2002 to 2016, I took out the reevaluation year because I didn't want to mucky up the numbers. From a point-in-point time from 2002 to 2016, my taxes were up 89%. So that's pretty steep, I would say. And the property value is estimated to be up between 5 and 10%. So, again, it's not sustainable to continue on this path. We've really got to rein some things in. So, in summary, I know it's hard. I haven't been around as long as these people have, and I know there's been a lot of good work done. And these are very difficult times, and with the state and everything else. But I really firmly believe we've got to challenge our operating model, and we've got to stretch. Long-term, we've got to do some more planning and restructure some of the things that we have with the legacy benefits. And we've got to make some of these difficult decisions and evaluate our options. A line-by-line review would not be a bad thing. That's something that I would be committed to in the future. But I made a commitment when I was running for office, and I listened to people, and I watched the YouTubes, actually. I was out of town when the public hearings took place. But the people are speaking loudly and clearly. If you're listening, they're very concerned about affordability and their ability to stay in town. I'm very concerned about seniors. I'm very concerned about attracting young people. The rental properties, they just pass through the taxes. The small businesses, they're on these net triple leases. They get passed through the taxes. And at some point, we're not going to be in a position to lure these businesses to us or be able to keep seniors in home and be able to attract young families. So, we all love West Hartford. That's why we're here. But at some point, we've really got to face into the financial challenges that are before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm really proud of West Hartford for creating the conditions that allow us to present a budget tonight with an actual decrease in the real estate and property mill rate. Councilman Sweeney repeated that line. I think we need to repeat it again. We just heard about the very compelling testimony, actually, from landlords talking about passing on those costs through the tenants. Hopefully they'll pass on the cut. Understandably, a small one. But yes, we are cutting the mill rate for real estate and property. This budget reflects our town's values, a progressive community with a firm eye on the bottom line, and it's a result of a level of teamwork that really goes beyond this chamber. So while I'm going to begin with the absolutely deserved praise from Mayor Sherry Cantor, with her tireless dedication to this town, comprehensive understanding of finance and budgeting, and a calming influence, which is very appreciated in times of crisis or near crisis, it is just a pleasure to work with and learn from her. But I also want to talk about the other people and institutions that make this budget possible. First, our residents, who came out this year to budget hearings and with justifiable concerns about the continued affordability of living here. We heard them. We also heard last year the parents who came out. Most of us were at Charter Oak. When they came out last year to object to the potential cuts to the schools and passionately defended programs that enrich the lives of their children and the community as a whole. Councilman Barnes talks about seeking a zero budget and asking our staff to prepare such a budget. That's what happened last time. They did prepare a budget. We showed what the cuts would be. We all looked at those cuts. And primarily on the Board of Ed side, but we had them on our side as well. They showed us, this is what will save you $1 million. And I don't remember anybody saying, hey, we ought to do it. But we saw those numbers. We know what it will take. And these are cuts to the kind of services that make West Hartford great. And if we can avoid them, we should certainly try to avoid them. But in addition to what we've heard from the people who come out and testify, we also heard people on social media. And we hear people in the street, we hear people phone calls as well. And along those lines of the communication, I want to thank our local media. Weehaw News, The Current, and West Hartford Press have, for their local coverage. We would be a weaker and less informed community without those dedicated journalists. I, for one, don't know how I would keep up with all the mostly positive development news we've been getting without Ronnie's business buzz. And I'm serious, it's not just a shout out to one outlet, but that kind of positive news is really important for our local businesses. That's a huge service that we get to encourage our residents to shop locally and know what's out there. And that's the sort of thing that makes us this stronger community. And yes, social media sites, neighbors and friends, and also enemies and distant cousins are doing their part to keep us connected. They make West Hartford a more desirable place to live and help advertise the good news to prospective residents and businesses. Credit should also go to Barbara Lerner and the rest of the chamber, the neighborhood associations, our entrepreneurs and restaurateurs and developers, including our wonderful housing authority, who are all vital to our ability to build the grand list and maintain affordability. If we are to continue to maintain our position as the magnet for regional development and the premier suburb in Connecticut, and maybe the Northeast, we need to keep up the well-deserved cheerleading and continue to sell all that our town has to offer. It's an easy sell, but we tend to forget that. And here and in Connecticut as a whole, people should want to come here and businesses should. This budget will allow our partners at the Board of Education to continue to provide the best education around. There is no more important function for any municipality than providing free, quality education. No school system balances fiscal responsibility and the moral imperative of providing excellent opportunities to our diverse range of backgrounds and abilities than we do. I am confident this mission will continue, and I thank the board for all that they do. And finally, I need to talk about our staff, dedicated public servants who are so important to the success of our town. Salaries and budgets are a challenge in any budget, salary and benefits. But our staff, our employees are not the problem. They are the solution. They earn our respect and gratitude every day and work tirelessly to keep our community safe, efficient, attractive, and compassionate. Our educators, police officers, firefighters, work crews, public works, and support staffs are second to none. The executive team I work with most, Matt, of course, and also Mark McGovern of Community Services and John Phillips of Public Works, our town planner, Todd Dumay, and engineer Dwayne Martin, are constantly looking for more efficient ways to deliver essential services and are not satisfied with simply standing pat. They strive to make West Hartford better every day. Martha Church and her staff, along with the support of the Friends of the Library, have created welcoming spaces that are essential to our town's success. And Helen Rubino Turco's tough-minded negotiation skills and the help of groups like the Friends of Fern Park are improving our parks while staying within limited budgets every year. This is a good budget because this is a great town. I will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Williams?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'd like to start off as my colleagues have, which is to thank all of them. I think all of them said that, but I'm not sure. Thanks, Liz, Peter, Mr. Hart, Mr. Allaire. I come to tonight's vote a little bit frustrated. Tonight's budget vote, to me, is not about whether this budget is good for today, but if it is good for tomorrow, whether it makes West Hartford's tomorrow better for its residents and next generation or not. And to me, it does not, and accordingly, I will not support it. West Hartford is unaffordable for many and becoming unaffordable for many others. This budget and the town's budget trends exacerbate the town's unaffordability. According to the town manager's presentation, the initial proposed budget for the first time ever raised the average single-family home with 2 motor vehicles tax burden to more than $10,000. And if you think about that for a moment, it's really astounding. That's approximately $830 a month. Now, I know that the current budget is reduced from the initial proposed budget, but the average impact to families is similar and likewise unsustainable. On issue after issue, this body consistently articulates concerns for affordability and more specifically affordable housing, yet actions speak louder than words, and this budget is one loud action. Not only does this budget adversely impact homeowners, like I just described, it also hurts our renters and those on fixed incomes, the sentiments that's been already discussed today. And Councilman Barnes made reference to John Souza, who is a local landlord who manages many units in West Hartford, and much of which is affordable, according to him. And when he testified, he said that the last budget increase required him to raise rents by as much as $65 per month, which is really, he described, a devastating increase for his renters, who, by the way, are seeing increasing rental options in surrounding towns. This body seems to accept annual increases of 2 to 3% and quantifies it in a manner that suggests the monthly increase passed on to families is relatively modest. We do that every year. The problem is that the annual increase is now roughly $7 to $10 million proposition, which is compounded year after year. And that's really how that manifests is really a massive incremental encroachment, as described by Councilwoman Fay on family budgets. And inevitably, and I prepared for this and it happened again tonight, one of my colleagues on the other side will raise the issue of what do you want to cut. And the problem with the question to me is that it presupposes that the services we are offering right now are run as efficiently as possible. And I don't believe they are. Some are, some are not. And it's a question, I think, to Councilman Winograd's point about last year. It focuses the discussion on specific services. We get rid of a senior center, a library, something like that. And it misses the systemic issues as I see them. And so to illustrate my point, we all become familiar with specific departments by our service on subcommittees. And I serve with Councilman Sweeney and Councilman Davidoff on public safety, where I've dealt a great deal with the fire department, which is a very important, and I want to emphasize this, very important part of our local government, as evidenced just yesterday or the day before by the fire we had on Newington Road. And I really don't want my comments to be overly simplified as criticisms of the firefighters or the department specifically, because that's not what this is. But what I'm going to describe is an example that informs my position, and I want to share it with you and the public. Before I was elected to the town council, it passed the paramedic program, and as I understand it, the idea came about because our town was seeing a declining number of fires, but had a number of firefighters in excess of what was necessary to meet the fire response demands. You know, code upgrades improved, we had just less fires. It's just factual. In order to use our talented department members who were not addressing as many fires as years prior, some firefighters took on paramedic responsibility, and the overall breadth of the department expanded accordingly. And for months now, the town has projected that the program is resulting in a revenue to the town. However, that revenue projection is made without accounting for any actual paramedic/firefighter labor costs being included in the overall calculation, save for one position that's administrative. So I've been asking for months for analysis which includes such firefighter, paramedic labor costs, so that I think we can have a more objective discussion about whether the paramedic program is indeed a revenue stream for our community. And I don't believe we can make any assessments about the program's viability unless and until we include actual labor costs for the program in our analysis. So where are we now? Now there is, without this information, now there's talk of expanding the program further, potentially to include ambulance transport. That's been discussed at the subcommittee meeting. Mr. Hart mentioned it during his initial budget presentation. And the town is going to engage a consultant to analyze the department's future at a cost to fall somewhere in the 6-digit range. And so I, for one, think that if we just made some reasonable assumptions about the number of firefighters used in the paramedic program, our staff could determine whether the program was actually a revenue to the town. I suspect it's not, but I'm open to being wrong. Another example within the department falls with fire inspectors. We just discussed this the other day, Councilman Davidoff. As I understand it, the fire chief requested that the town manager provide 2 new inspector positions in this year's budget because the fire department's 2 current inspectors are severely backlogged through no fault of their own. There's just a demand. But Mr. Hart didn't think the 2 new positions were appropriate. But regardless, putting that request aside, at the same time, the department currently has 20 firefighters who are also certified as inspectors. But from what I understand, we cannot reallocate those talents to do inspections due to labor contract restrictions, things of that nature, minimum requirements. That's just not efficient. So like I've said time and time again, we are following in the state's footsteps, hoping the tide will change, focusing on revenue and asking our good citizens to just stay the course. And in my view, it's irresponsible and I think lacks compassion. It's no good business and no responsible homeowner would do that. And so I can't support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Dutch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Like everybody else, I want to thank you, Mr. Hart, Mr. Privatera, for all of your work that you've done on the budget. The mayor of this town is supposed to be a part-time volunteer position, and I think for you it's essentially full-time. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate, especially, this is only my second year dealing with budget issues, your availability to answer questions. In the morning, at night, anytime something came up. And I know that doesn't just apply to our side of the aisle, but also to our Republican colleagues and also residents of the town. And so thank you for all of the work that you've put into this. And again, to the town staff for everything that you do. And to all of my colleagues, I truly enjoyed serving with all of you. And, but budget making might not be the funnest thing that we do, but I think that we've got a good group of folks that we work with. When looking at the town budget, my first consideration is what made my wife and I decide to move back to West Hartford to raise our family. What attracts other families to West Hartford what attracts other people to West Hartford to raise their families? What attracts businesses? What makes businesses want to invest in our community? And it's the award-winning, top-rated schools. It's the beautiful town parks and libraries with the great leisure service programs. It's clean streets. It's safe neighborhoods. It's our diverse community. And it's our vibrant town center. And at the same time, I agree with everybody. The affordability is obviously a concern. And so I want to thank Mayor Cantor and the town staff for the tireless work that they've put in over the last couple of weeks, so that we can achieve a cut in the mill rate while maintaining the exceptional level of town services that our diverse population expects. And I just want to, most of what I want to say has already been said, but I just want to close by saying that the work doesn't stop here. I do agree that we have a lot of work that we need to do on a continuing basis. West Hartford remains one of the most desirable towns in Connecticut to live in. But we have a lot of pressures. We have fixed costs. We have unfunded liabilities that were frankly unfunded years ago. We have a lack of revenue diversification.
We have essentially a state of permanent fiscal crisis at the state level. All of these are important or significant pressures on the town budget. And so I do think that over the next year, we need to work very hard on coming up with a strategic vision to address all of those. And I look forward to working with everybody on this council to do that. For tonight, I plan on voting in favor of this budget. And again, thank you for everybody who did all that, who put so much work into this.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start by saying I will be voting yes on this budget, and I'll explain why. Budgets reflect a community's priorities, and this budget reflects that. We tasked our new manager, Mr. Hart, to deliver a budget that met the needs of our community, and Mr. Hart delivered a budget of 41.54 mils. In recent discussions at committee level and over months of time, we were able to reduce the mill rate to 41.29. Tonight, the mill rate on real estate and personal property is 41.0. Let me repeat, the mill rate on personal property and real estate is 41.0. And the last I checked, that's less than 41.54. It's less than 41.04, which was the mill rate last year. I'm having a hard time getting a connection, understanding why 41 mils, which is less than 41.04, translates to a property increase on real and personal property when the numbers and the math just don't add up to that. I've been involved in municipal government since the early 90s. This is the second time that I will be voting on a budget where the mill rate is less than the mill rate in the previous year. That's an accomplishment to be quite proud of. Our residents asked us to hold the line on the mill rate, and we've done that. The mill rate is going to be 41 mils on real and personal property. That's something that this body ought to be quite proud of. That's something I thought this evening would have had a support from all 9 of our members. It's a great accomplishment for our town to come out of the evening with that mill rate. I'd like to thank our manager for doing all the work that he did with his assistant, Brittany Stevenson. Mr. Privatera and Ms. Hewitt in the Finance Department, thank you. For Public Safety, the committee I do chair, Chief Allen, Chief Sinsagawi, Acting Chief Coppinger, and Assistant Chief McHugh. I want to thank them for providing us with realistic explanations as to what was presented in the budget. Our budget process is done in committee level. And what we do is we have books that are this thick that outline every expense by category, and we look through them. And the directors were all instructed to come in with budgets as low as possible. And I believe that they did, because otherwise we would not have gotten to 41 mils. Yes, we had a meeting, I think it was a week ago, I think it was Wednesday, the last meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee, and we talked about broad issues as to where we need to go going forward. And the manager, right out of the box, said, and I wrote this down, that we need to do long-term strategic planning. And I think there was bipartisan consensus to engage in that process, and I'm certain that we will undertake that as soon as we finish this budget process, because we understand that there needs to be a long-term fiscal stability plan. And it's no joke that things are unsustainable, that they may become unaffordable, that there needs to be system-wide examinations of the services that we provide, and there may need to be changes to the model of the programs and services that we provide to our community. But we need to identify what our core services are to our community. As Mr. Dallas Dodge just mentioned, revenue diversification. The state law only provides us with one way to raise revenue, and that's through the property tax. Are there other ways to raise revenue? We need to look for those and lobby for those and have the ability to get those. One way would be there was one floated to receive receipts off a food or entertainment tax that you see in other places across the country. And I know firsthand when I traveled to Williamsburg, Virginia, on the bill is a tax of X percentage that goes right to the city of Williamsburg. We talk about regionalization of services. That's something that we have to do more than just talk about. In public safety, there were two areas that we talked about regionalization of services. One dealt with the police fire range, indoor fire range, and there was a discussion, and there will be further discussion as to whether or not we could get neighboring communities to join us in either refurbishing or establishing a state-of-the-art fire range, because all of the certified officers in all our departments need to be up to speed and at the right standard for discharge of their firearm. Another one was our animal pound. Does every town in the state of Connecticut need to have an animal shelter, an animal pound? That's things that we need to look at. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up this evening the fact that we have decided under the manager's direction to issue an RFQ, a request for ideas, to examine whether or not our fire department, as currently constituted, is the most efficient, best practice in terms of the model going forward. And there may be changes, there may be savings, we don't know, but unless we are willing to take this internal examination of the things that are driving our budget, we won't know those answers. And I think that's a step in the right direction. Let me be perfectly clear. Pension, MDC, healthcare, contractual wages are all forces that are something that we needed to deal with, but we have to be realists and deal in reality of the situation. I've said this almost every budget. I cannot unilaterally change a collective bargaining agreement and tell employees who are members of a union that I am going to change X, Y, and Z. That is something that needs to be bargained for. And I would also be remiss this evening if I didn't also point out through institutional history that Mayor Cantor and others who have sat here before have worked very diligently over the years to restructure our health care plans that we offer our employees, our new hires, our pension plans that we offer new hires, that we have not taken our eye off the ball, that when we get up to bat, our eye is quite focused to make certain we hit it out of the ballpark. And our residents and our community have been the biggest beneficiaries. West Hartford is a wonderful community to live in. It's a safe community. It provides excellent services, excellent educational opportunities, and I can speak directly from personal experience from two children who've gone through the public school system who have been served quite well as many neighbors and friends of theirs who have been well served. You don't hear people saying West Hartford schools are not high caliber. They are. And that is a huge portion of our budget. Our teachers, our administrators, they give 100% to their opportunities going forward. Grand list growth. We experienced grand list growth. And why did we do it? Because businesses and developers realize that West Hartford is the place that they want to be. I've been on the council now, this will be my 11th year. The reason people want to do that is West Hartford is a well-run community. They want to make an investment in our community, and they know that the return on their investment is well served by making that investment in our community. And you see a repurpose of Corbin's Corner. It wasn't much long ago that the Sears Plaza was pretty dilapidated and not very attractive looking. But we were able to attract a developer who was able to repurpose that. And what do we have now? We have REI's moved over there. We have Saks off Fifth Avenue. We have a Bye Bye Baby coming. We have some other type of market. Yes, someone mentioned Shake Shack. People just don't make random investments in our community without wondering whether or not they're going to see a return on their investment and whether or not it's going to be a welcoming thing. If one's seen the zoning applications, and I love zoning applications, I may be the only person on this body that does love zoning applications. What we have seen over the past several years is people who have been interested in a different kind of model of zoning, and it's been apartment buildings. We've seen a lot of rental apartment buildings. Does that show a change in our demographic, in what millennials want, and what empty nesters may need? I think it represents a change. But here too, we've seen developers take their hard-earned money and invest it in our community. And we heard just recently about the project on Steel Road where Mr. Sager came forward and asked us to approve another building. And we did. And he was floored by the response that he got to his project, how fast it sold out, how low the vacancy rate is. I think there is none. There's a waiting list. And he can't wait to get another thing online. We also heard it with the Patrizzi property. So people are coming forward to make these adjustments. And as someone once pointed out at a meeting, we're not going to get any more land here in West Hartford. It's how we purpose our land and restructure it and make decisions to keep our community quite vibrant. So I think that is something that is quite necessary. So I'm very excited this evening. 41 mills, less than 4104. I'm realistic that there's work to be done. I'm encouraged that my colleagues sitting around the table are willing to take on the task. I believe everybody has the skill set, knowledge, and willing to make the commitment to work with our administration to make certain that West Hartford moves forward. But let me be perfectly clear. West Hartford's brightest days still lie ahead. And I think that we ought to be positive. We ought to be ambassadors of good news. And tonight, there is a lot of good news. And I'll end on this. Our council is very fortunate to have an amazing leader at its helm. In my opinion, Sherry Cantor probably has spent more hours collectively on this, more hours on this budget than collectively the rest of us sitting here have done. When I spoke to Sherry yesterday about the change from going from 4129 to 4100, she said, I can't talk a lot because I'm really busy trying to make this whole thing work. And every time I've engaged with Sherry, she's always had her eye on this budget since January. And let me tell you, Sherry and I have not seen eye to eye during this entire process. Because as I stated at the last Finance and Budget meeting, I too, like many residents in West Hartford, don't want to pay one more unnecessary dollar to the town of West Hartford than I have to. Well, tonight, the residents of West Hartford are going to see that their real property taxes and their personal property taxes are going to be less. And to the landlords who came to that public hearing, your property taxes next budget year will not be increasing because we will not be increasing the mill rate on your property. So there will be no increased rent that you need to pass along because we're not increasing your real estate taxes next year. And if you look around the greater Hartford community and other communities that we compare ourselves with, West Hartford is a phenomenal community. And it's a leader like our mayor, Sherry Cantor, who has led us through very difficult times over the years, just not this year, over the years, who has gotten the job done for our residents. I don't really care if Sherry's a fellow Democrat or if she was be a Republican. I don't really care the party affiliation. What I see is somebody who takes this job on a full-time basis, unpaid volunteer, who has read every one of these lines and every one of these budgets and can explain it to anybody who cares to ask a question. And she'll take the time to do that right. I'm in awe. And what I'm more in awe, Madam Mayor, is your ability tonight to get our side of the aisle to support a mill rate of 41.00 on real and personal property. Kudos to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. So I'm going to close this because then we're going to do a roll call vote on each and every item. And so much has been said, and I really am humbled. And the first thank you goes to, obviously, everybody at the table here serves as volunteers and has put so much into this process. But we had a new town manager that came in at a point where, the state budget was still being debated, and there was potential for some very, very huge cuts. So until the end of October, we were dealing with mid-year some very significant challenges. So Matt spent a lot of time meeting with all directors and talking about how we would manage our way through a complete cut. There were cuts made. There were millions of dollars of cuts made. That's why, I mean, you have to deal in the reality of the numbers, and millions of dollars worth of cuts have been made. But thank you, Matt, for working so hard to produce a budget that was very responsible, and at the point of each day that goes by, we obviously know more, but we appreciate all that you do and the work with the directors have done. You cannot know how professional our financial department is. They're well known throughout the state as being a premier financial department throughout the state of Connecticut. Peter Privatera came from Stanford, was incredibly sought after, and has led our department and our town through some very, very difficult times, and has always been responsive and helpful and incredibly knowledgeable. And his professional staff, Liz Hewitt and Barbara Rua, who is on maternity leave, put so much effort into this budget. Liz can answer anything. It's really her that I go to get the answers, to answer everybody's questions. It's just I've asked them enough that I know them. So I sincerely appreciate all that you do every day on behalf of the town of West Hartford. And all of our directors, all of our chairs did talk about the directors that they work with. So I want to, again, kudos to the directors for all they do every day to streamline and be as efficient and effective and as high quality as they can be, because our residents demand it. Our police and fire chiefs are the same. They, everybody looks at their departments with such pride and are never satisfied with where things are at the moment, but always looking to do things better. Our superintendent of schools and our school administration, I remember the superintendent saying at a new teacher welcome that the one word that's not allowed in the school system, and I don't think it's allowed at the town level either, is satisfied. We're never satisfied. We always have to keep looking at the way to do things better. Again, I want to thank everyone at the table, because it does take commitment and collaboration and respect. And we always show respect for each other. We may not always agree, but we treat each other with civility and respect. We do get a lot of awards. I'm not going to read them all, I promise. But I will read the 3 this year. But these aren't by chance. Nobody is saying, oh, West Hartford deserves another award. These are because of the track record that we've had and the investments we've made and what people say when they live here and what people say when they move from here. 2018 livability.com, best places to live, the only Connecticut municipality to make the top 100 best places to live out of more than 2,300 cities with populations 20,000 to 350,000, based on 40 dozens of data points: economics, housing, amenities, infrastructure, demographics, social and civic capital, education, and healthcare. Niches, I think, 2018 best places to live in Connecticut. West Hartford is in first place, rigorously analyzed dozens of public data sets, millions of reviews to produce comprehensive ranking and profiles for every K-12 school, college, and neighborhood. Move Buddha recently ranked West Hartford number 6 in the nation among the 50 most popular mid-sized cities to move to. And then in the past, Kiplinger's and Personal Finance and Best Cities to Live In and Family Circle and Hartford Magazine and Best Housing Values and Smart Asset and Best Public Schools and Washington Post Top 10 Challenging High Schools. Highly educated top 101 cities with people having PhD degrees in American urban centers. Connecticut Magazine's Best Places to Live. And of course, fiscally sound rating by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And Moody's, their caveat was the condition of the state when we met with them and talked to them. They are highly impressed with town management. Words from a recent war, West Hartford remains a bright light, one of the premier communities in the region, state, and country. A safe, vibrant, diverse community with top-notch schools, quality municipal services, highly engaged citizens, and many social and cultural events. I don't normally quote Shaquille O'Neal, but I will. Excellent is not a singular act, but a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. This is based off a quote from Aristotle. I have said that before, but it's true. It's how you practice and what you do. None of this would happen on the basis if we let our foundation crumble. Our residents and families also know very, very intimately that our world is changing rapidly, and we need to be strategic and innovative to preserve and protect what makes our community successful and desirable. As our residents adapt and change to new realities, our community also has to listen, adapt, and modernize. Change is coming, whether we like it or not, and as Jack Welch said, change before you have to. Those who initiate change will have a better opportunity to manage the change that is inevitable. We need to be innovative, creative, and constantly work to improve and do better. Again, never satisfied with the status quo. But step one in a budget is you have to live within your reality and you have to set your priorities. Budgets are reflections of public policy, but again, within the barriers and the bounds of what you have, contracts and unfunded mandates that you have, and that is the reality. So you need to set your priorities as your policy. As I listen to our residents, as Mr. Sweeney said when he was door knocking, I oftentimes am at someone's door, at office hours, a town event, block party, fundraiser. I hear the passion and the pride for our welcoming, diverse, vibrant, and safe community. I hear the appreciation and also the expectation of top quality town services and schools, and the appreciation, and I probably hear it more than many of you at the table, for our highly professional and motivated employees. But I also hear the concern. I hear the concern about the financial condition of our state and the increasing pressure on property taxes. I am listening. We're all listening. Town staff is listening. Town manager is listening. The council has been working hard since the town manager presented his well-thought-out budget of how to preserve services and reduce taxes. And I am pleased, I am more than pleased that we were able to cut the real estate mill rate. It has not happened other than a reval year since I've been here. So this took a lot of work. And again, it's not one time. It was because we budgeted responsibly last year, and we're not making up for holes like some other of our neighboring towns. My top priority as your mayor is for West Hartford to be competitive and affordable while providing exceptional level of services that continue to attract residents, whether they be empty nesters or new families beginning, and businesses to invest in the community and thrive and grow here. And they are. We will be going to some pretty exciting ribbon cuttings this week. West Hartford remains one of the most desirable towns in Connecticut and in the country. We can't lose sight of this. But decreased state support, increasing fixed costs, unfunded mandates, and a lack of revenue diversification have put unfair pressure on all of Connecticut municipalities. Our work doesn't end with the passage of this budget. We just begin the next level of strategic planning, and certain doors are open, particularly this year. Again, I said no budget can be taken in isolation. Municipal budgets have commitments that cannot be changed. In the short terms, there are things that can change in the long term. Our state budget we talked about went till October 26th. We had no break. We've just been continuously talking about budget. And it showed. It showed, I think, I agree with Mr. Barnes, that some of why people didn't come out maybe early on was just a fatigue of budget. I responded to every person that has called me, or I talked to many people after the public hearing. When you explain to them the parameters that we're in, they understand it, but they want us to keep working going forward to bend the curve. And we will continue to do that, and we will have to make some difficult decisions. But the reality is our budget drivers are, in the schools are 57% of our budget. We have decreasing state aid. We have challenging times. We have to give extra attention to school security, investments, and in counseling. That wasn't the case 20 years ago, and to the same degree. We have an increase in special ed students that have unfunded mandates that require incredible services that are increasing at rates of 30%. We have contracts that obviously that are, whether it be transportation, there's only 2 bus companies that serve our area now. We are tied to that. We also have tuition, out-of-district tuition expenses that have been increasing at double-digit rates. That's our reality. So we've got to figure out how best to handle that. But our schools, our per pupil expenditure, and you need to take it in context, are $15,761 per pupil. Our DIRG-B, those are our neighbors and who we're compared to, is $16,933. We would have spent almost $12 million more this year in educating our students if we had the average of a DIRG-B per pupil student. State average is $16,576. We would have spent $8 million more. Top 10 districts, because I've heard the talk about we have economies of scale that maybe some of our smaller neighbors don't. That top 10 largest districts has $16,346 per pupil cost. That's a $6 million more investment that we would have had to make, or a cost we would have had. Our per pupil spending is 117 out of 169 towns. We have 22% non-English language home speakers. 74 languages spoken in our home. There are not the same diversity in other schools that have achieved our success. We're 43% minority population, 21% free and reduced lunch, 12% special ed services. We are unique and we are successful. And I want to thank our leadership on the school side and the Board of Education for producing such extraordinary results. On the town side, MDC, 11% increase this year, $1 million driver. Pension, 2.4, 11% driver. That is unfunded pensions that were not funded prior to us getting here and are past service costs. And we need to fund this obligation that existed prior to any of us coming on this council. And it is a struggle. Healthcare town and retirees is another driver. Again, those are retirees. They're not people that we can, those are contracts that we have. Contingency on contracts, again, negotiated contracts, we have to fill that obligation. And then we had a big offset this year because of our refuse hauling contract, which benefited all of those things. But those are the drivers. That is our reality. So to cut some of these things, so for us to cut $9 million from the budget. Library is $3.4 million. Our whole leisure and services department, that means every park and recreational facilities, $3.1 million. Plant and facilities is $2.6 million. Public safety and fire, our Public Works Department is $10.7 million. And public and safety and fire, $26.5 million. In 2008, our property taxes were 70% of our total revenue. Now they're 89%. It falls to the residents and our businesses to pay for what we get in West Hartford. As noted by CCM, state and federal payments to local governments are lower in Connecticut than in most other states. Our state government has routinely postponed or canceled municipal increases written into law, resulting in serious financial hardships for local governments in Connecticut. Local governments need to rely on stability, but the decreasing lack of state support and the uncertainty puts increasing strain on property tax. We know that, and we have to deal with this reality. The high property taxes in Connecticut is, besides the Gold Coast and a couple of towns of the Gold Coast, everybody has we are a high property tax state. West Hartford pays the 5th highest amount in income tax behind Greenwich, Stamford, Fairfield, and Westport. We're the 25th highest in income tax we pay to the state per capita, and our median income is 67. So we have significant wealth, but we also have significant need. West Hartford poverty rate is 8%. The state average is 9.8%. Our ECS that we get per pupil is a little over $2,000. And the state of Connecticut is in a similar situation to the federal government. The state of Connecticut pays the 3rd highest amount per capita to the federal government, behind Delaware and Minnesota, about $14,000 per capita. Yet, we're 45th in what we receive back from the federal government per capita, about $6,000. Due to the spending cap in 1992, Connecticut has not been able to go after federal dollars we qualify for. But this inequity was made substantially worse by the elimination of state and local tax, the SALT deduction, the cap of $10,000. It is extraordinarily unfair to the Northeast and the West Coast. The dynamic with West Hartford is we are going to have to live in that reality, but it is unfair to our taxpayers. In West Hartford, we compare all of Connecticut has mill rates, and they all are reevaluating at different times. Many of the tax increases that residents feel at a time that are high, it's a revaluation shift. Unfortunately, in this past year, maybe not fortunately to people that own homes like that, but unfortunately to many people, higher value homes went down relative to other homes. So they went down faster than other homes went up. So it was, I think of a glass of water where you're shifting it. It's just kind of moving around. Two-family homes went up because the market rate and the demand for two-family homes is higher. That hurt. Those values went up 20 to 30%, but it was tied to the values of those homes. If we had cut the rate 10%, they still would have seen a decent increase. And it is a very difficult, antiquated process. I do hope that the state looks at the revaluation process and maybe goes to indexing or something else, because it is dramatic to people that have these big swings. We used to be on 10-year, now we're 5-year. It's better, but it's still not great. But in comparing equalized mill rates that compare, evening out Grandless, West Hartford was one of 3 communities in all of our greater Hartford area that saw a decrease in equalized mill rate above 15%. We saw a decrease in equalized mill rate of 44%, and that was because of Grandless growth, and it did get reflected in our mill rates. We are continuing to attract people that invest and businesses that invest in our community. We also have continued to attract talented people between Matt Hart, Brittany Stevenson, and if you haven't met Brittany, it is the treat of your life. And soon we will be welcoming officially our new police chief, Reddick. How we treat our employees will determine the talent of people that we can recruit here. I don't want to go through everything here, but we are constantly reinventing ourselves, whether it's the paramedic service. How do we, with minimum manning, have our firefighters serve our community in the best way possible? We don't pay a contract of $300,000. We did receive $500,000 of revenue. We have a better service of 5 paramedics on duty 24/7 than the 1.5 to 2 that we had at a cost of $300,000 to this town. That's almost $1 million swing at a better product. If we can do it better, we're going to figure that out. We invested in our Cornerstone Pool, our new operator for Rockledge, our management of Veterans Memorial Ice Skating Rink. We added curbside recycling and textiles and pumpkin recycling and post-holiday cardboard recycling to allow our community to decrease the amount that we're going to be spending on tipping fees. We've provided forward-thinking incentive zoning, experiential zoning. We've tried to fix problems and employee parking in the town center, trying to work with our off-site private parking vendor to have employees move off the inventory on our on-street lots. We have developments like Steel Road that were leased, and this developer, as Mr. Davidoff said, had never ever had a property leased before was leased up before he actually completed the project. The Delamar, which is a state-of-the-art hotel that is attracting people from all around the world, and I hear about it all the time. Corbin's Collection, which we're going to be ribbon cutting this week. People aren't seeing new retail in their areas. We can't lose sight of what is happening in our own community. Hebrew Healthcare, the Chatfield Memory Center, Macaulay Lifestyle investing $4 million to improve their property. The TOD going on in the 616 opening, the Yukon campus, and what's going to happen there. But we know that we have serious challenges, and we're going to continue to And we know that this is our reality. We have increasing pressures from unpredictable and decreasing state funding, the impact of SALT, like I mentioned, aging infrastructure, and increasing fixed costs of pensions, healthcare, contractual wages, and MDC. Our diverse school population with decreasing state aid, unfunded state mandates, and increasing focus on school security, and a new normal, the weird and severe weather patterns that we as a community are experiencing. Yet, elected leadership has remained committed to funding our priorities, public safety, education, quality town services, investing in infrastructure, and funding our long-term obligations and building our rainy day fund. It is the strongest it's ever been, the highest it's ever been. This has not been easy or quick. This has a long arc, but it's the commitment year after year after year and the professional town staff that helps us get there. We need to work on strategic planning, and that's what we are doing. We've done a lot of strategic planning, but we are committed to doing more. And again, the doors of opportunity for some of these things are open now. We have a plan of conservation and development that we're working on that will guide development for the next 10 years. We can be a part of that economic development plan. We can continue to promote development and redevelopment in our key commercial areas, including Yukon Campus, Town Center, Bishop's Corner, New Park, Park Road, and New Britain Avenue. Continue to work with our delegation and state leadership on the importance of diversification of revenue and state support. As state support declines, all municipalities are asking for more tools. We will be a part of that message. Expense strategies include MDC. We've talked about we are part of an antiquated, unfair allocation on the MDC ad valorem study. We need to pursue changing that structure. And if there's a study is happening now, and if that study doesn't work, we've got to figure out how we make that more how we work on that. Conduct new efficiency and effectiveness studies, as we just discussed, and we will be starting with the fire department and the paramedic service. Work with our Board of Education to build on the efficiencies between town and schools where possible. Every job that we have between finance director, building and services, IT are all combined. How can we do things better, improve communication and planning, and share goals and planning? We need to work with labor to develop sustainable, competitive, fair agreements. All of our labor contracts except police are up this year. We have a unique opportunity. Complete solar installation and other sustainable projects, a complete evaluation of smart and curbside collections to reduce long-term tipping fee increases, which is in the horizon, and we need to analyze the financing options for our very large unfunded liabilities that we can't negotiate or tax our way out of. These initiatives, as I said, will take time. They cannot be done in a year. They're essential to strengthen West Hartford's quality of life and our financial stability. But this year, we have done that within the parameters that we can. We are decreasing, very slightly, our mill rate on real estate. That has not happened in well over a decade, maybe 2 decades. West Hartford, and maybe longer than that, that's all I had time to look back. West Hartford is a diverse, vibrant, safe, and welcoming community. We have been through some very challenging times before, 2001, 2008, financial crashes, natural disasters, October snowstorm, record snowstorms in 2012, but we have a highly qualified and dedicated town manager, professional and committed department heads and staff, highly engaged and smart residents. Together, we will navigate our way through these challenging times. In summary, this is a responsible and fair budget. It is lean, that preserves the town's ability to provide current services efficiently and effectively, meet our ever-increasing obligations, protect and strengthen our fund balance, and retain the important ability for us to manage our way through very unpredictable times. I humbly thank the residents of West Hartford for the honor and privilege to serve you to the best of my ability, and for my colleagues for my service, and especially my colleague, Mr. Davidoff, who serves on the Finance and Budget Committee with me hand in hand, and he has been my rock through this whole process, and Mrs. Fay for participating in the process so committed and deliberatively. As a first time, it's a lot to learn. I appreciate all that you have done, and I obviously will be supporting this budget. So we will go to a roll call. Ms.
Can I
LeBron.
just make a couple comments? Thank you. Well, for the reporters in the room, hopefully they weren't taking that down verbatim, because you guys will be up all night with those comments, but your comments were very thoughtful, so thank you. It's a couple quick comments. So I think the financial challenges that we face have been laid bare. I think most of my colleagues have touched on them and recognized these challenges going forward. And so while I do look forward to a long-term planning process that we have all discussed, I think this year was a missed opportunity not to be able to address them. We've talked about the real property mill rate slightly decreasing. I think what we failed to talk about was the motor vehicle tax mill rate increasing 9 mills from 32 to 41. So there is a tax increase that our residents will certainly feel in the coming year. And finally, with respect to Mr. Davidoff's comments on lobbying for revenue diversification, I think that's something certainly worth looking at, but unfortunately, a lot of times revenue diversification just means new taxes and fees. And while you mention, as you do every year, about the reality of the situation, I think if we were going to lobby for something, recognizing what the biggest drivers in our budget are, that we would lobby for collective bargaining reform to be able to give our community more of an opportunity to control the costs that are actually putting the big pressures on our budget. So hopefully in the coming year we'll see some effort between this body and maybe even our state delegation to lobby for those important changes to give us more control over our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Roll call, please. Thank you.
Okay, this is on number 9, the ordinance concerning appropriations.
Madam Mayor?
Oh, yes, sorry.
motion-
We're going to get.
The motion on the table was a motion to discuss. There
Right.
has been no
You're
motion
right.
to
You're
adopt.
absolutely right. I got a little.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So now it's a little headed all the time. Okay, so we're going to, that was the motion to discuss. We're going to move number 9 and do a roll call vote. So let's make a motion, and just to make sure, and second, we'll start with number 9. Ms. Kerry.
I make a motion to accept the ordinance concerning appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. LeBrun?
Mr. Barnes.
No.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
Passes 6-3.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrun. Number 10, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the ordinance deauthorizing $5,552,000 for projects authorized in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2018 to 2019, appropriating $15,063,000 for projects in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2019-2020, and authorizing the issuance of bonds of the town in the amount not to exceed $9,511,000 to finance the appropriations, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. LeBrun?
Mr. Barnes.
No.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
It passes 6-3.
Number 11, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the ordinance concerning appropriations to and in the capital improvement fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. LeBrun?
Mr. Barnes.
No.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
It passes 6-3.
Number 12, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the substitute resolution concerning a tax levy on the list of October 1st, 2017.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Does this require a roll call? It's a resolution. I don't think so, right?
Honestly, I don't recall under our charter whether it does or not. Certainly wouldn't hurt.
Okay, we will do roll call. Ms. LeBrun?
Mr. Barnes.
No.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Is that coming in? Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
It passes 6-3.
Number 13, Ms. Kerrigan. We'll do roll call. We'll do roll call too on this one. So number 13.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the resolution authorizing year-end budgetary transfers.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Ms. LeBeau, roll call.
Mr. Barnes.
No.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
It passes 6-3.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeau. Okay, up to reports from the town manager, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I will try to move through the report very quickly. I've distributed copies to the council, starting off with the category of council business. You can see the various meetings we have, ranging from our Human Services Committee this Thursday at 8 a.m. through the next council meeting. These are council meetings only, or council committees. Moving on to staff reports. Our work continues on the Park Road I-84 interchange area. Our contractor, they've started work constructing the retaining wall that'll be located between the on and the off ramps. So over the next couple of weeks, this is very important, we're going to need temporary lane closures to maintain safe work areas on this project. So we are encouraging motorists, and we'll be engaging in a public relations campaign on this. People should expect delays in this area, and we do advise folks to avoid the project area and seek alternative routes to the extent possible. Next item, very pleased that we'll be swearing in our new police chief, Vernon Riddick. Currently the chief in Waterbury. We conducted a competitive recruitment process. He clearly rose to the top, really excited about his appointment. We will swear in Chief Riddick. We've had to adjust the time somewhat. We will hold the ceremony at 12 noon on Tuesday, May 29th, here in this room. So I would encourage council members, I know it's a work day, but if you're available to attend, we would absolutely love to have you. Moving on to page 2, and I'm not going to touch on every item here. Council can read this at your leisure. Continuing with the police department, we're conducting a You Drive, You Text, You Pay campaign that's focused on preventing distracted driving. It's been underway the entire month of April. Great success with it. We'll continue the campaign again this coming August. The next item, wanted to touch on our spring yard waste collection, which I know is very important to our residents. We'll begin our second of 3 rounds. We'll do it the week of May 7th through the 11th. So we're going to have a collection in April, in May, and in June. Moving on to page 3. Touching on the former UConn campus, earlier this month, as the council knows, UConn informed us of their plans to fence a portion of the former campus site. They're doing this for public safety, public health reasons. It's required by our federal regulatory agencies. To UConn's credit, however, they're locating the fencing adjacent to the buildings and to areas where they're conducting remediation, and the larger campus will remain available to our residents. Moving on to the category of outside agencies, West Hartford is one of 72 communities to be nominated by the governor as a potential opportunity zone. What's an opportunity zone? This is a federal program that's designed to encourage long-term investment in low to moderate income areas. So we had applied for the new Park Avenue corridor. That was one of 300 census tracts statewide, and want to thank the administration. They've supported our application, and we're one of 72 that's moving forward, and hopefully the U.S. Department of Treasury will review our application favorably as well. Mayor, the last page, page 4, upcoming events and reports. Those are for you as the next item of the council agenda. I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take any questions council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for the town manager? I think we've asked you a lot of questions over the last couple of months. Okay, so number 15 is announcements. The Memorial Day Parade organizations that have a military or veteran focus are encouraged to Participate in the Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 28th at 10 a.m. Contact Renee McHugh at 860-561-7521 or her emails on the website. Volunteers are also needed to assist on the morning of the parade and should contact Renee as well. The Mayor's Charity Ball, 19th Annual Mayor's Charity Ball, will be held on Saturday, May 12th under the Grand Tent in Town Hall, starting at 6 p.m. Guests can expect an unforgettable evening that includes a sit-down gourmet meal prepared by Dora Restaurant Group. You'll enjoy entertainment by Playhouse on Park, and many special guests, live auction and raising paddles and more. The MCs are Kara Sunland and Dennis House this year. We're very excited to have them, and guests will be dancing under the stars to the music of locomotion. They really are great. For tickets, go to www.themayorscharityBall.org, and it benefits the Playhouse on Park and the town that cares. Family Fishing Day 2018. Join us at Fern Ridge Park on Saturday, May 5th, 9 to 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. for a morning festival focused on learning how to fish. There will be learning stations to explore, raffles, casting, lessons, fishing for the whole family. Bring your own gear for a fun morning at Fern Ridge Park. It's a free event. Why do we have a fly that's plugging us? And go to www.westhartfordct.gov Leisure Services. This event is sponsored by the MDC and Farmington Valley Chapter of Trout Unlimited. Historic Walking Tour Series. Celebrate Historic Preservation Month this May with a trio of walking tours on Saturdays, May 5th, 9th, 19th, and 26th, led by the award-winning architectural historian Mary Donahue. West Hartford has a treasure trove of American-style building styles from the early 20th century, featuring a wealth of architectural details, all best appreciated on foot. The May 5th tour will explore Park Road. The May 19th tour will focus on Arnoldale and Beverly Roads, and May 26th will explore Elmwood. West Hartford Figure Skating Club Spring Show will be held at Veterans Memorial Ice Skating Rink on Saturday, May 12th, 5 to 7, and then you can come right to the Mayor's Charity Ball. The event will showcase the ice skating talents of local skaters. That's all I have. Does anybody have anything else? No? Okay, with that, we will go to reports from Corporation Counsel. Mr. Allaire.
I have no formal report. There's no need for executive session. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Allaire? Thank you for keeping me in line. I appreciate that. Okay, appointments. I have 3. I, Charles Matthews, as Town Council Zoning Alternate for a term ending 12/31/2019. Raymond Giolito as a regular member of the Design Review Advisory Committee for a term ending 12/31/2020. And Mary Riley to the Senior Citizen Advisory Commission for a term ending 12/31/2022. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 27.
Adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 28, Ms. Kerrigan. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your service. No petitions, no executive session, and I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.